In this episode of Photography 101, we're answering one very simple question: RAW or JPEG? So what are RAW and JPEG? Well, they are different file formats that we can save images as. JPEG is an industry standard format, so all websites that you view probably have a majority of their images as JPEG. JPEG can be viewed on any phone, tablet, computer, or photo frame. Anything that shows an image will probably recognize and be able to display a JPEG image. RAW, on the other hand, is a term deriving a camera manufacturer's native file format. These vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. So for example, in dealing with Canon, these are what we call CR2 files. These are only recognizable either on a camera or using specialist software such as Photoshop or Lightroom. In terms of file size, RAW formats are 20, 30 plus megabytes a piece, whereas JPEGs can be 6 or 7 or sometimes less. So you have RAW that is a bigger file format and only distinguishable by cameras and certain computers, or you have JPEG that is a lot smaller and globally recognized. So surely JPEG is better. Or is it? First, let's understand what is happening in the camera whenever we take an image. The light is captured by the sensor. That information is then pulled off the sensor and put into a processing unit. The processor will then make any alterations to the image that are required and will then save it as whichever file format we choose, either RAW or JPEG. So the critical difference between RAW and JPEG is to do with how much information is stored. See, JPEG is a file compression format, so it will remove any excessive information that it deems not necessary in order to shrink the size of the file down. With a RAW file, however, all the information is taken from the sensor into the processor and is then just put into one complete file. From there, it's passed to a memory buffer where it sits and waits to be recorded onto the memory card in the camera. If you take a picture straight from a camera, you probably wouldn't recognize by looking at it whether it is RAW or JPEG because they look exactly the same. It's only when we try to edit the photograph that the difference becomes apparent. Take these two images, for example. Now, to look at now, they look exactly the same. One of them is in RAW format, one of them is in JPEG. Now, watch what happens when I try to not only brighten the area around the edge of the image, but darken up the bright bit in the middle. You can see that the RAW file has been able to extract a lot more of the information through the window than is available in the JPEG. That's because when the RAW file's been saved, all of that extra information has actually been recorded, whereas with the JPEG file, the camera's cast it all aside as no longer required. Also, having all that extra information in the RAW file means that we can make other adjustments after the fact. So things like the color balance becomes a lot easier to adjust as well. So in terms of manipulating an image, a RAW file gives you a lot more flexibility than you get with a JPEG file. The downside to that, however, is you have to edit your photographs. If you take a photograph in JPEG, it's instantly recognizable. So you can just take the memory card out of your camera, pop it into a computer, and straight away start uploading those photographs to social media or wherever you want. If you're shooting in RAW, however, it means that you have to take the images from the card, run them through some software, and then save them into a recognizable file format, probably JPEG. Even if you don't want to make any alterations to the image itself, even if it looks absolutely perfect the way it is, you still have to have it converted from a RAW format to something more usable. Otherwise, you can't share it anywhere. So RAW adds more time to your workflow, whereas JPEG is a lot quicker. Then you have the sizes of the files themselves. RAW files can be 3-4 times the size of JPEG. Not only have you got to account for either having more memory cards or bigger memory cards in order to fit those files on, you've then got to have more space on your computer in order to save them, and it could also impact how you're shooting. So as I mentioned before, when we take an image, they're passed from the processor onto a memory buffer. So without that memory buffer, the camera would have to take a picture and then the processor write it straight to the memory card. The camera couldn't then take another picture until it had finished writing that first image. With a memory buffer in place, it means that the camera can just keep shooting and shooting and putting the files into this storage space while they're getting written to the memory card. The problem is that we still can't clear them onto the memory card as quick as they're being put into the buffer. If we continue to push files into the buffer, at some point it is going to fill up. At that point, we can't take any more photographs, so the camera has to stop and wait for space on the buffer to appear. So if we're shooting RAW, those files are a lot bigger. So they're going to fill the buffer up a lot quicker with fewer shots than if we were shooting with JPEG. So if you're in an environment where you're taking a lot of images in a very short space of time, you may find yourself hitting the limit with the buffer and the camera having to stop, and that could hinder you getting that crucial shot you've been waiting for. RAW will give you more flexibility and allow you to edit your pictures better. However, if you're not wanting to really edit the images, or at least only do basic level edits, then you could probably get away with JPEG, because these are going to be more convenient for you. Now, I like to take the time and edit my pictures, which is why I shoot in a RAW format. But what are you shooting? Are you a RAW? Are you a JPEG? So that's it for another episode, guys. Join me in the next one where we're going to start talking about what and how we use Flash. See you there.